so please don't hold it against me. We would like to call the Audit Committee meeting of April 22nd, 2010 to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. I would seek approval of the final minutes for the January 21, 2010 Audit Committee meeting. Are there any corrections or additions?
So moved.
If not, I will now entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
It's been moved and it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
We will now hear a general report from the City Auditor. Mr. Snowden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Currently, the following audits or projects are in process. Fire rescue GPS, that's an audit that I'm leading. It's in the fieldwork stage. A&E awards, I'm leading that one, and it's in the reporting stage. Sports fields, Nancy Beatty's leading that one. It's in the fieldwork stage. Fuel access and monitoring, Brian Smith is leading that, and it's in the reporting stage. Employee vendor review, that's actually been released. If you'll notice, you've gotten a copy of that just recently, but it wasn't released in time to make it on the agenda for this meeting. The Hanson contract is in the planning stage, and I'm leading that one. Contract review, project engineering consulting, Philip Marmorowski is leading that one. It's in the reporting stage. And there's one that was just started this last week that's not on the list. It's passport services in the city clerk's office, and that one's being led by Brian Smith. It's in the field work, or in the planning and field work stage. Investigations, we have 4 investigations that are open. Gary Phillips is working on those. And previously you asked for a report on incomplete recommendations related to the issued internal control reviews. Currently, no internal control reviews have incomplete recommendations. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that concludes my report.
Are there any questions or discussions?
Maybe. Would it be appropriate, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate, Mr. Snelding, for me to ask you to go back to slide 1, which is on page 2 of our PowerPoint, I guess. There you go. And just give a brief synopsis of the individual audits and projects. What you've told us is their status, but why are we doing an audit on these projects?
Certainly, Councilman Wolfson. The first one is in fire rescue. It's a GPS audit. We're looking at, this was one that I had sent you a request to work on that. We have been requested by the city manager's office to look into location of some trucks at a certain point in time, and we requested that, and we ended up using more than the 40 hours that we tried to do on these quick things, so I had to request to get some additional hours. So that one's related to that.
Okay, and what is the status of that one?
It's, we're close to finished on that one. We have a couple of steps that we're working on with that related to actually going through the GPS information and then also making a trip to the community to do some interviews to see if we can establish whether a truck was in that neighborhood or not.
This is a public meeting, is it not?
It is.
Okay. And are you able to, is that going to be a public report that you're going to give us?
I'm going to give you a report.
And when is that report going to come?
I believe you'll have an answer to that shortly after the end of the month.
Okay, so
Around
in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, first part of May.
Okay, thank you.
We're very nearly complete on that. The second one is the A&E awards. It has to do with Public Works issuing and recommending contracts for architectural and engineering firms. It was one of the things we were looking at related to contracts, and it's a process where members of the Public Works Department select vendors to receive those contracts. Those are not bid contracts, those are awarded contracts, and we're looking into that process.
Okay.
We're at the point where we've completed our field work, and we're in a report writing stage on that one. Sports fields has to do with leisure services. We're working on an audit in leisure services related to that. We're looking at the assignment of fields. Actually, Nancy Beatty's working on that one, but if she has something to add, I'll let her do that. But basically, what we're looking at is looking at how those fields are assigned, the equity involved in it, usage, looking for economy and efficiency related to those issues. Sure. Fuel access and monitoring. We actually have a report completed on that. Well, it's not completed, it's in the review process right now. And that particular report has to do, we have fuel cards where we use cards to fill up at various locations within city yards. And it's an audit to look at the efficiency and effectiveness of that, and also look at the security related to that. So we're in the process of that. You should have that one shortly. I'd say probably in about the same time frame before the middle of May. You should have a final report on that one. The employee vendor file, whether that was a comparison, which you now have, that one's now complete. It was a comparison of employees compared against the vendor file, looking for employees that function both as a vendor, as an employee, but didn't follow proper procedure in setting that up. So you have that report now. The Hanson contract is in the planning stages. This was a request that was brought to the committee to look at the overall performance and contract, and look at the contract in general related to the Hanson contract. And the contract review on project engineering and consulting, that's the last of the contracts that we pulled off of the consent agenda, the last one that we're working on in this group of contracts we have in this iteration of selecting those contracts, and we're just looking at performance related to that. If the contract was let with in accordance with what we're allowed to do as far as the procedures and rules are with that, and additionally, if the department is actually monitoring the contract the way that they say, just to see if the deliverables are coming the way they should, that our project engineer is doing his part, and that the contractor is actually living up to what they said.
Okay, thank you for that review.
Any further questions or discussions? If not, we'll go to agenda item 5, discussion and possible. Actually, is there a motion with respect to Mr. Snowden's report?
So moved.
It's been moved for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion and possible action on audit of purchasing and contracts division. Ms. Beatty?
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. As part of the audit plan, last summer I completed an audit of Central Stores. Central Stores is responsible for the receipt, storage, and delivery of selected supplies used by city departments. Staffing consists of a supervisor and 3 inventory control clerks. Central Stores has been included in the Tier 2 budget cuts. It was represented that all the audit recommendations have been implemented. Central Stores is now in the process of reducing all their inventory levels to 0, and staff have been trained on the processes for these type items. I'd like to briefly discuss the audit findings. Department representatives do not sign documentation confirming that they verified the receipt of their orders. Central Stores monitoring procedures fail to detect department orders that were not processed. There are inconsistencies in the information recorded on the documents used in the surplus property disposition process. Daily counts of inventory are used by Central Stores to verify the accuracy of inventory totals. The historical information relating to these counts was deleted from Oracle. The reports used to track the accuracy of inventory totals did not include all variants based upon when tolerant indicators were established in Oracle. Each June, a physical inventory of the warehouse is completed. Improvements to this process were recommended. The inactive items report is used to monitor obsolete and slow-moving inventory. Erroneous information in this report impacts the effectiveness of the monitoring process. This concludes my briefing. I would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
So what you did was you found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 findings, and have you recommended to the department the changes that are necessary to correct the action that was wrong?
Right, included in the report is what the criteria should be, what the condition was at that point in time, and it also includes a recommendation. And they have indicated to me that they have implemented all my recommendations.
And do you do a follow-up to make sure they've done
Right,
that?
I plan on doing that next week.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Is there or was there a way to determine the effect to the city on this inventory that could not be identified? Meaning that, is it possible inventory is being sold to third parties? And
I didn't really determine, with my testing, I did not find any issues where that was missing as far as the inventory, the current inventory. What I found is their tracking mechanism to look for it had issues. For example, on the tolerance indicators, for any item that in their inventory that had a positive, or in other words, there's more inventory on hand, or a negative variance, in the reporting, only the positive variants were included. And so any kind of time there was a negative variance, that wasn't included in the report.
but if the inventory's been deleted from Oracle, how could you test?
It
for
wasn't the inventory that was deleted.
Okay.
It was the historical information relating to those tests and counts of the inventory. Weekly, they did daily counts of randomly selected items. And those test counts, the results of those test counts was deleted from Oracle,
I see.
not the inventory
Not the
itself.
inventory itself. Okay. So, one of my favorite questions, when the outside auditors do their review of the city's financials, are they relying on these findings, and are they finding exceptions to the internal controls for the city because of such deletions?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if Mark's trying to come down here.
Mark-
Nothing that's been-
Mark said he was going to defer this to you.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I don't know if you hear me in the microphone, but I don't think I know the auditors, or outside auditors, do review, we spend some time with Brad and his folks, and they're aware of what reports they've done. I don't know that they would have looked at this in particular. I don't know that this would have been a material item in the audit as inventory levels or not.
And it's not material as far as possibly this one report, and this is a recently issued report, but the findings throughout the year and on a global basis for the city does lead into a materiality for financial statement presentation. Do they evaluate these reports for materiality for the city, for internal controls on a global basis?
I don't know for a fact that they do, but I've got to believe that they do, and that they have a responsibility.
And so in their management letter, have they addressed internal control?
This is
Not on this specific item, but,
was not mentioned.
okay. That answers my question. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Easier question to answer.
Yeah. Any further questions?
Could I just indicate, it looks as though from your management plan of actions that they've given you that several of the items were remedied at the time that you presented them to them, including the one that I kind of wondered about with regard to the purge option. That's always a concern.
Right.
You know, somebody could have something wander off on you. So again, with that, if there are no other questions, I would move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Agenda item 6, discussion and possible action on procedures for foreign minimum accounting standard checklist for Nevada courts. Mr. Snowden? Mr. Smith, I'm sorry.
Brian Smith was the lead auditor on this, and he'll give the report.
Thank you. Good morning. The municipal court is required by the State of Nevada Administrative Office of the Courts, otherwise known as the AOC, to annually complete what is known as the Minimum Accounting Standards Checklist, or also known as the MAS checklist, which is a checklist comprised of 329 questions about the operations and internal controls of the court. Each question requires a response of yes, no, or other, along with an explanation for any response of no or other. Here's just an example of the size of this checklist that the AOC requires. Now, every 3 years, an outside CPA firm or an internal audit agency is required to complete the MAS checklist and submit it to the AOC. And for fiscal year 2008-09, the court requested our assistance in completing the checklist to comply with this requirement. And this committee approved us performing this work during the audit committee meeting of April 23rd, 2009. And the procedures were completed by myself and my colleague Nancy Beattie. According to the instructions to the MAS checklist, the MAS is not intended to be an edict to courts on the exact manner in which their internal control and financial operations must be carried out. However, the MAS is provided to give guidance for implementing generally accepted financial principles. The purpose of having an auditor complete the checklist is to verify that courts are maintaining consistent and effective financial policies and procedures, and that generally accepted accounting principles such as segregation of responsibilities, internal controls, and audit trails are in place. Our procedures included meetings with court management and employees, observations of the various operations of the court, and a review of various operational documents. The results of our procedures were documented in the MAS checklist and in a letter to the AOC. The checklist and letter were submitted to the AOC on the stipulated deadline of December 1st, 2009. In addition, we documented our findings in an audit report. We completed the MAS checklist for operations as they existed as of June 30th, 2009, the end of the fiscal year, and the reporting period of the required checklist. The court subsequently implemented a new case management system on November 16th, 2009. The new case management system has been in development over a period of several years and is a significant change from the previous mainframe system. Our procedures did not include a review of this new system as it was implemented subsequent to the MAS checklist reporting period. In our review of the court's operations against the standards within the MAS checklist, we identified areas of noncompliance as identified or as defined by the checklist. And many of these are the result of inherent system deficiencies in the old mainframe system. The following are some of the more notable areas of noncompliance. The court's written policies and procedures do not include in detail certain information outlined in the checklist. The court did not have documentation indicating that current policies and procedures had been distributed to employees involved in certain functions of the court. Deficiencies were noted in the court's safe combination policy and practices. The Department of Detention Enforcement accepts bail payments on behalf of the court, and the court has not implemented policies and procedures for following IRS reporting requirements using Form 8300, which is titled Report of Cash Payments Over $10,000 Received in a Trade or Business. And it's applicable when more than $10,000 in cash is received for bail for certain offenses. Considering the nature of the offenses handled by the municipal court and the established bail amounts, this would be a rare occurrence that this form would be required. We found that the court's accounts receivable are not tracked and reported in accordance with all of the MAS checklist standards due to mainframe system limitations. A bond tracking register is not used by the court to reconcile bonds received with those reported in the case management system. In addition, no reconciliation is completed between bonds accepted by the Department of Detention Enforcement and bonds transferred to the court. The bail register is no longer being reconciled to the general ledger due to mainframe system issues. Problems with the bail register have been an ongoing system issue for the court and were identified and reported on during our completion of the MAS checklist in 1999. In addition to the areas of noncompliance with the MAS checklist, we identify a couple other issues that need to be addressed. The court's document titled Minimum Accounting Standards System of Internal Controls has not been revised since July 2002 and does not correlate with the current MAS checklist. The court does not have a formal document document outlining the procedures followed by the Justice Court in collecting the municipal court's payments from the Regional Justice Center's lobby drop boxes. Once documented, the court needs to evaluate the adequacy of these procedures in relation to its internal control standards. Court management has documented their responses to the areas of noncompliance and other issues, and indicated that the issues will be addressed with the implementation of the new case management system. The city auditor's office will follow up on the resolution of the findings identified. I'd now be happy to respond to any questions the committee has, and also like to recognize the presence of Pam Jefferson and Rhonda Ruby of the municipal court.
Are there any questions? Where are they?
They are right behind you there.
Oh.
I do have one question, Mr. Chairman. On the first page, it indicates our procedures did not include detailed transaction or system testing. Wouldn't that be a part of a customary audit, or was this not a customary audit?
I wouldn't call this a true performance audit. To do a performance audit of the entire municipal court would take a very long time. And what this checklist does, it has you go through these 329 questions, and you're kind of skimming the operations of the court just to make sure that certain controls are in place. The AOC is still working with this checklist in making it a useful document for the courts. It's required for not only larger courts, but all the small courts within the state. And so it's kind of hard to have a document that's applicable for all of these courts. And so it takes a lot of, it takes professional judgment and interpretation as you go through this checklist to decide exactly what the AOC, how they want a response to the checklist items. So, no, it's not a true performance audit, but what we found in doing this checklist is areas that we can go back to at a future time and dig in deeper and go back and look at historical transactions. But also the fact that the court has just recently changed over to this new system, at that time it would have been a futile effort to do any detailed testing. So, did we look at certain transactions? And we looked at a lot of documentation. In fact, we spent 3 months over at the court, and you can just imagine with all the divisions of the court, we spent a lot of time meeting with the division managers and getting feedback on what's going on in the court.
Any further questions?
Yes. Lois, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Not necessarily on this subject at all, but it has to do with municipal court. So this is more of a question to you, Rad. I don't remember what meeting we were at, Betsy, but it was within the last 60 days. Perhaps it was at one of our budget meetings when I brought up the subject of a different way of collecting traffic fines, because I talked about perhaps having the officers be able to assess fines and collect fines at the time of the issuance of the ticket. And people kind of laughed, and people kind of giggled, and maybe it is a laughable, giggable comment. But then I got a couple of emails, and apparently another state actually does this, where the officers in the field have the discretion when they pull a offender over for speeding to, once a determination has been made that a violation occurred, to impose the fine and collect it right then. Apparently there's another state that does that. So I don't know if this is the right forum to bring this up, but perhaps some sort of audit or report of how we collect our traffic fines. And I'm just talking about the traffic fines. I'm certainly not talking about fines that are assessed on DUIs or domestic batteries. And I guess that would give us some information to perhaps go to the next level. So my question, Rad, is can we do that? Can we perform some sort of review? And I don't want it to be too time-consuming, because I understand that you're busy. But, for example, if a police officer pulls somebody over today in the city of Las Vegas and issues them a ticket for speeding, day one is the day of offense. The next event would be, well, there's some sub-events when the ticket gets to the court and all that, but The next event for the perpetrator is when they have to go to court. That might be 2 or 3 months down the road. And then a fine is imposed, and that might not be received for another 2 or 3 months. So I'd be interested in receiving a report on the flow of traffic tickets and the collection of fines, because this may be useful in the idea of whether or not we can change our system over to what I'm proposing, the consideration of having officers. You smile. If I'm out of line, Betsy, tell me.
No,
But I think we're trying to think outside the box. We're trying to raise revenue. We're trying to make our public think that we're more user-friendly, although I don't know if a cop telling you owe $100 today is user-friendly.
I don't know where the chairman wants to go with this, but a lot of times that kind of preliminary analysis work we would do on the manager side of the house versus the auditor side of the house. And once we put a system in place like that, then the auditor would typically come in and say, you're doing it right or you're not doing it right, or there may be a few efficiencies you could do in improving this process. They don't typically design new processes.
Okay.
Of course. I mean, they help us in that discussion and development.
But if I wanted a report regarding the flow, that's my choice of word. So I would look to you, and internally within city management, we would conduct it versus our...
Yes.
Okay.
If there was something that we thought was, there was a problem in an accounting or something fraudulent, or we were completely missing something, then obviously I would reach out to Rad, and then he would talk to you guys, and we would probably work together on something. But to just evaluate how the system currently works and what the time frame is for collection and how effective we are at collections, we could probably produce a report that maybe the audit committee would like to see and decide if there needed to be further auditing of that process. But
Okay.
typically that would be, do you agree with that?
I agree. We can gather some information if you want us to, but it probably would be more effective.
I'd like to insert here. You're not policy making. You're policy checking. And we don't want this committee, and we don't want the city auditor to be in a policy-making position. This report should first be generated by management. That once that report has been circulated, if there's a belief that there's a need to review policy and the procedures and the implementations, then this city auditor or the city auditor's group then may be called upon to review the procedures. But we're not in a policy-making position, nor do we want to be in that position, because we're oversight.
And I agree, and I wasn't looking for policy making. I was looking for basically data.
Okay, and I think, Councilman, I disagree, because what you're asking the city auditors to do is to make a determination on how much revenue could be collected if a police officer pulled over as you called it, a perpetrator, and said, here, collect these dollars. I think management needs to generate that type of information. Additionally, the belief is, and this is only my belief because this is the first that I've heard of this, by what authority does that police officer have when he pulls that person over, issues a parking ticket to say, now give me the check? Is there authority for that police officer? We would be asking our city auditors to make a determination that police or that metro officer or whomever, highway patrol officer, can make that determination. I don't even know, can they? I mean, can a police officer pull me over, say, sir, you've been speeding here, cut me a check, and I disagree with him, but I have the peer pressure now of that police officer in front of me saying, all right, here's my check, where's my rights? I would go to my attorney and say, have my rights been violated? I don't think I want
That's
this.
exactly what we would look into. We would think about, is the authority there to do it? What would the effectiveness of it be? What are the policy implications?
And then if there is a requirement for a municipal code change or whatever it may be, that would come from management through the city council.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. I don't care who does it. But because we were talking about an analysis of the municipal court, I thought that perhaps your committee would be the one to gather information. I don't care who does it.
Okay.
I just want the information gathered so that the city can make initial determinations whether or not it's a viable type of program.
Okay, and from my perspective, I believe that request should be made through the appropriate channels, but not through this forum here. Sorry.
So, well, that request has been heard, I'm sure.
Okay. A couple of quick questions here that may not be so quick. For the most part, the management action plan is to review not only your findings, but also to determine if, also to look at being in compliance with the new mass checklist standards, as I've read through this report. As part of this process, the municipal courts have been reviewed previously by the city auditors. And there have been deficiencies that have been identified, and in previous meetings of this board, it's been indicated that those matters have been corrected. Based on your findings here, they've not been corrected. Some of those same issues are still current issues that are ongoing issues.
Back in 1999, as a part of our audit of the minimum accounting standards, that was the first year that we completed the mass checklist, there were a number of recommendations. And there are still 5 of those recommendations that are outstanding, that we have not closed off yet. And my impression is that with the implementation of this new system, that many, if not all of those, have or will be cleared in the near future.
And part of one of the reports was the physical handling of cash, and the fact that cash was not properly accounted for. And as I'm reading, once again, this report, there appears to be the same continuing issue. There's a weakness in internal
Which
controls.
recommendations
I don't
specifically?
have it right here in front of me, but the appearance is that cash is still not being handled correctly. Is that a
wouldn't-
true statement?
No, I wouldn't make that judgment based
Okay.
on our findings. In fact, as in my discussions with the state, the city of Las Vegas's municipal court is known in the state as being one of the best run courts. They have a very good reputation. They understand that with the mainframe system, there have been some significant limitations. Because this system that was implemented, in fact, do you happen to recall when the mass system was implemented? Over 20 years ago?
87, 86?
87? It was never intended to be an accounting system. And that's a lot of the problems. It's a transaction processing system, but they've made some programming changes over the years, but my understanding, during the last 5 years, or even last 10 years, IT has been very reluctant to get into that system, knowing that we were going to be implementing this new system.
And at least for my benefit, I've read both the old and the new, and there is a major difference between the two. The Form 8300, were you able to quantify the few transactions that may have required an 8300?
No, but we had some discussions. In fact, this was an area where we had a lot of discussions with the state, because, first of all, we had to determine whether the municipal court was indeed a state court, because it specifically talks about federal and state courts.
Right.
And so we did come to the conclusion, and in talking to the judicial officer at the OC, that the municipal court is a part of the state system, so it is considered a state court under this IRS.
So is it outside of the requirement to submit an 8300?
Let me read for you. Actually, Phil, can you bring up those additional slides there? Let's see. Actually, let me give you copies of the publication there. That's the IRS publication. Let's see. How many do you have there?
I need one more.
Whoops. If you go to the first or the second page in the publication, there's a clause that specifically addresses the requirements for the courts. And as you see there, in fact, if you go to the next slide, here's what the publication says. So any clerk of any federal or state court who receives more than $10,000 in cash as bail for an individual charged with any of the following criminal offenses federal offense involving a controlled substance, racketeering, money laundering, and any state offense substantially similar. Based on the nature of the offenses in the municipal court and the minimal bail amounts related to those offenses, it would be a very rare occurrence that we would have cash received as bail over at detention and enforcement.
Okay, and by definition, cash is also cashier's checks.
Right.
Wire transfers.
Now, if we go to the next slide there, here's where we just looked at whether the municipal court is a state court. I don't think we have to dwell on that. It is a state court. And then if we go to the next slide, this is some correspondence with Stacy Anderson, who's the judicial branch auditor. And like you see there in the bold, although most municipal courts may never experience the charges listed or receive bail greater than $10,000, I would err on the safe side and develop policies and procedures for the completion of IRS Form 8300 to ensure the court staff are aware of the requirement. Now, since detention enforcement accepts bail on behalf of the court, it's important that the court establish policies and procedures for detention enforcement to follow so that they're aware of this requirement.
What is the penalty if the court does not provide the IRS for the 8,300?
I don't know.
May I add a comment?
Yeah.
Just to let you know, we have, what we're doing now with our new case management system, we have the ability to track for those type of transactions. So there is a report that's on the report list to develop to identify any cash transactions that may have occurred within a 24-hour period that would accumulate up to $10,000. And then in our auditing procedures, what we would do, of course, is get that exception report and follow up on the form. If the form is not complete, of course, we put procedures in place to complete the form and submit it. So that's our plan for this to comply with this IRS requirement.
Okay, and thank you. And that's extremely helpful. I guess my question is can the federal government impose a penalty on the city of Las Vegas?
Sure.
Can it? Okay.
Definitely.
So,
Mr. Chairman, the answer to your question on penalties is on page 4.
okay.
But could I ask a question of Ms. Jefferson? Is it true, as has been ascertained here, or at least assumed, that it is very rare that you ever receive
It is very
$10,000?
rare. It is. Most of the time, if the bill is that much, they're posting it on. It's very, very rare that we ever see that. But we'll have the ability to actually analyze it, where in the prior system, we couldn't tell.
And that may occur on multiple misdemeanors, right? We raise that $10,000 level
Yeah,
on
I
multiple
mean,
misdemeanors at one time.
They can have several
Right.
violations, and then the bill for each violation. If
Right.
they're
$10,000.
posting bail for all of them, we have to accumulate it. Right? And if it be 10, we would be required to complete it.
Mr. Chairman, just, normally bail that high would probably be a felony or something like that. Yeah, this
Just
would
like-
be,
My experience is in gaming, and we were required to do this for Regulation 6A. I don't know how it works here, but if there was a first violation, there would be a warning, and you would have time to implement the correction, and then there would be follow-up. You'd probably be on probation, and they would monitor your activity. That was our experience in gaming. Of course, I haven't been there in 8 years, but that's the way we did it, 6A.
Good deal. All right, thank you. Is there any further questions on this report? If not, I'd entertain a motion. It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Agenda item 7, discussion and possible action on internal control review activity report, December 31, 2009. Mr. Snelden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary Phillips was the lead auditor on this audit. He'll give a report.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, committee. This report includes 2 internal control reviews that were issued in the 6 months ending December 31st, 2009. Community Court had ACID and Leisure Services. You see on this slide here that there were ACID fraud recommendations for 3. Leisure Services had 6 recommendations, and that was a credit card fraud at the Bryan Safety. Management agreed to all 9 recommendations. They were tracked in the follow-up database. However, at this time, we cleared all the 9 recommendations. Any questions on this?
Are there any questions with respect to this agenda item? Hearing no questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Move.
It's been moved and second. Is all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. You look like you're ready to say something. I didn't want to.
He's ready for the next.
Okay. Agenda item 8, discussion and possible action on the audit of management controls over purchasing and inventory at Darling Tennyson. Mr. Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary Phillips was the lead auditor on this audit report, and will give this report. One thing I would like to mention is this is an example of our new policy. Instead of accumulating the internal control reviews and issuing them in one report every 6 months, we are now going to issue them as we complete them. So this is the first one.
Leisure Services operates the Darling Tennis Center. We're going to call it the DTC, not to be confused with the Downtown Transportation Center, but Darling Tennis Center. It's located at the Kellogg's Air Sports Complex. The DTC opened in September 2005. It rents courts, has private and group lessons, holds clinics and camps and basic tournaments, and sometimes some big tournaments at AT&T. The DTC has a pro shop that sells various tennis-related items to the public. The scope of this audit was a review of management controls over purchasing and inventory. We evaluated the effectiveness of the internal controls for purchasing and inventory, and we reviewed the city's procurement to pay process as it applied to the Darling Tennis Center. There is 4 recommendations under inventory purchasing procedures. First is to require DTC staff to use purchase orders for all retail supplies inventory purchases for the procure-to-pay process, and evaluate whether the DTC should continue to provide special orders for customers, thereby eliminating City of Las Vegas as the middleman. We also have management to communicate to the DTC staff that only goods and services for the benefit of the city are to be ordered using city accounts. We requested that management ask purchasing and contracts to provide additional training on procure-to-pay process for the Darling Tennis Center employees ordering inventory. Under inventory controls, we have 6 recommendations. First one being that the class administrator should make system changes to allow the DTC to track retail inventory separately from the program supplies inventory. And let me explain what that is. We have programs that we do, like the camps and the tournaments. We have supplies that we dedicate to that, and then we have tennis balls, rackets, and stuff like that that we need on the retail side. They both come in the same system, so we need to kind of split that out so we keep apples and oranges in check. The next recommendation is to evaluate the adequacy and storage and security of inventory at the Darling Tennis Center and address the identified inventory deficiencies. Evaluate the appropriateness of type of retail inventory and supplies being ordered by the DTC and identify appropriate inventory levels to be maintained. We need to ask management to evaluate installing the video surveillance system to monitor cash register and inventory at the DTC. And require the DTC employees to verify the receipt of inventory items individually against purchase orders. Any discrepancies should be reported to purchasing and contracts for resolution. What we have on that one is the ability to do an express receipt where we get a shipment in, somebody can push a button and take everything in without checking item by item. So what we want to do is make sure that we stop that practice and actually look at each item coming in. So sometimes we have that back orders and we're paying for things that we haven't received, so that we don't want to do. And then work with purchasing the contracts and resolving the DT's violation of the vending agreement with the Bureau of Services to the Blind and Visually Impaired. DTC was running a snack bar there, and they had the vending machines taken out. Since this time, we've got with the, I was going to say the blind people, but the agency there, we worked out, we got the vending machines back, and we took out the snack bar that we had operated out there. Leisure Services Management responded to all 10 recommendations, and City Auditor's Office worked closely with Leisure Services, and at this time, we closed out all the findings identified.
Any questions on this item?
I just wanted to ask, what was the violation exactly that was with the Bureau of Services to the Blind?
We had vending machines in there when it first
Instead
opened.
of, oh, okay.
And they took them out because we had tournaments out there, and they just, the vending machines couldn't keep up with the number of people
Right.
that were at the tournament, so they went out with a key card and bought Gatorade and fresh fruit and things that people who play tennis out there during the tournaments like. And it was just getting a hassle, so they decided to keep that. Well, when we were looking at it, it says, wait a minute, we need to have the vending machines because that's, Bureau of the Blind has that agreement, and we'd be in violation if we didn't give them first word of refusal. So when we met with them, they said, yes, we would like to have our vending machines in there. And a DTC staff said, well, we would like to have these type of products that are more geared to the clientele. So we're able to work out with contracting and leisure services and the Bureau of the Blind, an acceptable agreement. So they're not selling snacks, but there's 2 vending machines out there now.
Selling the things that you think are more needed?
Yes, like Gatorade and,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, I play tennis there, and I'm there at least once a week, and I've noticed it's very tightened up as far as, controls. You see a lot of people in retail and how they handle the machines and et cetera. And again, I don't see all the background on inventory of things, but every indication I get is that it's run very tightly.
No further questions, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second, all in favor? Aye. Agenda item 9, now is the time for public comment, if any. Hearing none and seeing none, this audit committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Jurisdictions, we have the officers
On your recommendation on as we talked about Fort Betsy, there's an idea that comes to mind. Because you have an excellent point. If there's somebody in some jurisdiction, someone doing something we could benefit by receiving money, I would recommend maybe a little bit of something that wouldn't cost the city anything, to have an investigative reporter go find out from the other jurisdiction, write out a little something which would be put in the paper, and then people would read it and say, hey, yeah, what about our city? And then the deal, somebody could say, in that they could say, yeah,